tonight. My name is Amy Von Kanel, and I'm joined by Bill Conley. I'm the CEO and founder of VolunteerCrowd, and Bill is the co-founder of Enrollment Intelligence. And tonight we're going to talk to you about something that is a constant in all of our lives, change. And it's relating to everything you're doing. It's relating to how you're studying, how you'll apply to college, and what you may encounter in the process. So we're really excited to share that with you. And before we get started, a little bit about who will be your presenters tonight. As I mentioned, my name is Amy Von Kanel, and I founded an organization called VolunteerCrowd a little over a year ago, and we've welcomed thousands of students and helped you find really meaningful volunteer projects. So our goal is to find academic-related volunteer opportunities that inspire you and help you create a service transcript that's going to make a lasting impression on the colleges and the employers that are in your future. Also, on a personal note, I've got 3 boys, and collectively they've volunteered over 1,000 hours, and this is the second student volunteer platform that I've built. But my background pales in comparison to Bill's. Bill, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Amy. And a couple of hours ago, I was harvesting cherry tomatoes in our community garden. I'm a volunteer there. And one of the great things about volunteerism is it's a lifetime sport. So we'll talk more about that going forward. I have on this slide some of places that I've worked over the years in enrollment management and admissions. My kids would say, Dad, it looks like you have a hard time holding a job. I think what it all rolls up to is that I've had the privilege of working at a number of fine institutions and reviewing, reading, and determining admission for over 100,000 students in my time. So what I hope I can provide tonight, even though I don't have a crystal ball on how COVID, the pandemic, and all of the ancillary realities in the school and home and in the economy will play out, I will do my best to try to give you a sense of how the college admissions process will unfold in 2020-21. So again, thank you and welcome. This my current new career as a retired educator is in enrollment intelligence now. This is not a promo blurb, but simply to say what my partner and I do is we provide mentoring and coaching primarily for new deans and vice presidents for enrollment management who are in their positions, new to an ever-changing, as Amy said, world, and providing support as they try to navigate these new and changing times. So it's a great opportunity for me to stay in higher education, but not on a day-to-day basis. But again, we hope that we can provide added benefit to the work they do. And what I'd like to do to kick off my part of the webinar is a quick survey that to get a sense of our audience. And what we're going to do is give everybody out there a chance, let's say a minute, to go through each of these questions, and then we'll get a summary. So we'll get a sense of one, who's out there and listening right now. I'm imagining that the vast majority of students, and only students complete this survey, please. Parents, take a step back. And secondly, what their expectations are for going to college, what type of college they see themselves going to. And then the last one, and this is one I really want you not to think deep and long about it, but literally just off the top of your head, what's your primary worry among those items listed there. So with that, I'll let the survey go, and I'll have Grace close the survey in a minute. So off we go. Let's wind down. 10 seconds to go. Terrific. Grace, in the background, can you produce the survey results for us? Wow, great. Terrific. Everybody was very participatory. It seems like people may have been doing some remote learning over the last few months. Very excellent. So as I anticipated, with nearly 50% are high school seniors, where the college admission process is in front of them right now. And certainly my comments will be focused on this year's admission process. But for the juniors and the sophomores on the webinar, these are circumstances and situations which will likely play out in some form for you as well. So this is not limited to seniors. Interesting, this is not unlike the national norm about how many students go to public universities versus private universities. Actually, the 25% saying they're intending to go to a private college is very consistent with the overall enrollment figures for private colleges. So the audience is reflective of current enrollments. And this is very interesting, that the worries you have, and it's interesting, particularly on the test scores, because as you'll see in a moment, what the pandemic has accelerated is the movement towards, if not permanent, temporary, as in the next admission cycle or two, of colleges going to test optional. So for the 30% who worry about their test scores not being strong enough, you're entering a process where test scores will be less influential in the process than in previous years. So that should certainly help out. And on the last item, the next most significant concern is financing higher education. We are so aware, the colleges, of the impact economically on the United States and the world in terms of employment. Colleges are already moving more money into financial aid. That's not to say that that's not a legitimate concern, but I do know that institutions are going to work very hard to make your college affordable. So I think that's a legitimate concern, but if you have a good process and apply to multiple schools, you will have multiple price points to consider. So we'll go back to the slide deck, and and again, thank you for participating. And This is a very busy slide, and I don't expect you to be reading it word for word, but let me give you some high-level summary of what this means. These trends, these items that are listed here, are all components of what we call holistic admissions. That is, in selective colleges, it's not just your test score or your GPA that drives the decision. In fact, most selective colleges, certainly including the UC system of 10 universities and the most selective colleges in the country, if they were to use just numbers, GPA or test scores or a combination, that would not winnow down the applicant pool sufficiently to admit the numbers that they can actually enroll. So what we do in holistic admission is the baseline is your academic performance and promise. Academic performance is going to be measured most importantly by your transcript, the courses you've taken, the rigor of those courses, and of course the performance measured by your GPA, weighted or unweighted. Now, as you'll see in a later slide, we are seeing a tremendous increase in the number of institutions who are suspending testing as a requirement. Prior to this year, about 1,000 universities in this country out of 4,000 were test optional or test blind. Test optional means they let the student decide if you want to submit scores for review. So it's your option to elect. I want you to look at my scores or I don't. There's also schools that are test blind, meaning they don't look at testing for any student. So you can't opt and say, I know you're test blind, but I want you to look at my test scores. What we're seeing is a tremendous increase in the number of schools in the next year or two who will go test optional or test blind. Reason being is that the testing agencies, the ACT and the SAT, have had to postpone multiple test dates starting this past spring in March. In fact, at one point by June 1, more than 1.5 million fewer students had taken a first SAT compared to a year ago. So there's not an expectation that students will be able to perhaps even take a single test, much less a second or third test beyond the first one. So that's what's precipitating the move towards test optional. And I'm just going to quickly move to this slide, and I'll come back to the holistic admissions. But thank you, Amy, by the way. Amy did the hard work of consolidating all this into a graph form, but you can see the increase is significant. And so you're likely to see more schools giving you the option to submit or not to submit your test scores. I don't have any overarching recommendation about whether you should submit or not submit. When I was vice president for enrollment management the past 8 years at Bucknell University in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, Bucknell decided before the pandemic to go test optional. And what we said was, this gives the student the opportunity to choose his or her narrative. If you think your test scores are ones that you want as part of your narrative, things you want to be reviewed, then by all means submit them. If you say, I'd like my transcript and my other dimensions to speak to my candidacy. That's your narrative. And colleges who are test optional and certainly test blind, they're not going to question your motives. They're not going to say, you didn't submit tests, so they must not be very good. That is not the way admission officers think. They believe you're choosing your narrative. So that's the best advice I can give you is choose the route that you think best represents your strengths. Now, going back to the admission trends, one of the things we're also going to see, in addition to the testing changes, is that junior year, and for the sophomores, of course, the current juniors, their sophomore year, et cetera, there may be a different scoring process or grading that occurred once you went into remote learning in March. Some schools stayed with letter grades, some stayed with their number grades, others shifted from numbers to pass fail. What I would urge you to remain, especially, and this is kind of for the parents more than perhaps the students, because parents, and I know I had 2 kids go off to college, and even with my experience, I had angst about how they would be looking at certain dimensions of my child's application. But the fact is, admission offices are used to a variance in grading systems. There's more than 20,000 high schools in this country, many more than that, and there is no single transcript. So admission officers are used to seeing different ways that grades are recorded. They will adapt if your school moves from a grade system to pass-fail. So that's not something you should worry about. The transcript will be interpreted by the admission office with help from your high school, because your high school will explain any change that has occurred in the grading system. Extracurriculars, I believe, and this is obviously one of the major threads or themes of this webinar, is in this changing world of admissions, how does volunteerism, community service, or more broadly considered extracurricular activities, will they play a bigger role? In my view, they will, because colleges are going to look to other areas to round out a student's admissibility with the absence of testing or the inconsistency in grading. So I think you're going to find institutions spending more time on that extracurricular dimension. You will, by the way, if you use the Common Application has created a new essay, short essay, singularly about COVID-19 and its impact on you. What I would urge students is to use that essay to talk about any particular circumstances that you feel impacted your education and your circumstances. Not to use the other major essay to be the COVID-19 essay. That major essay should still be about what you want to write about that's independent of the pandemic and its impact. We know it's real. But we don't want you to obsess about it. That's why there's the COVID-19 essay. Use that as your placeholder for how it's impacted you. And then finally, institutions across this country have long viewed diversity, equity, and inclusion as primary in their missions, but certainly the George Floyd's murder and the Black Lives Matter movement has in this time of pandemic, added another very important dimension to how we look at our community. So it's not just whether you are a diverse candidate, it's how you in your life and your experience, you've embraced differences and embraced them in a positive way. So that will be something going forward that's very important. So in summary, the best advice I can provide is don't be concerned about things you can't control. As an applicant, the seniors, put your story together. Tell it in a way that's true and honest and reflects who you are. Don't worry about how the institutions you're applying to read that story. They may read it a little bit differently from institution to institution, but you can't change your story based on where you're applying. You're the only best version of yourself, and that's what you need to put forward. So I'm going to let Amy pick up from here and put a finer point on volunteerism, but hopefully there'll be questions that'll be generated from my comments, and I'll be happy at the end of the, towards the end of the webinar to answer them. So Amy, over to you.
Bill. Thank you, Bill. And I just have one question for you. Did you want to review the Dean's commitment letter now?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I forgot to mention this. Making Caring Common is a movement. It's out of the Harvard Graduate School of Education, but it began about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was a response to what appeared to be in highly selective admissions and intensifying stress placed on students in terms of performance, particularly numbered performance, GPA, testing, and to the detriment of other dimensions of their experience. And so more than 150 colleges and universities, public and private, have signed the Dean's Commitment Letter that basically is saying to families, especially students, but also parents, we get it. It's not just the numbers. It's how you as a student live a fuller life. Are you empathetic? Do you have grit? Are you creative? Do you have a broader purpose than just generating A's? So this commitment letter is a way of communicating to students that admissions people are not just bean counters, adding up numbers. They're talking about the real person. And by the way, I should mention one other thing is please go to the individual institution you're applying to or thinking of applying to their admissions website. They will be updating, I'm sure, how they're making decisions in these different times. And so it's a good way to really understand how individual colleges are going to be weighing these different factors. So Amy, thanks again for making sure I hit on that one.
Thank you. That's great perspective. I'm going to kick things off with one of my favorite parts of this program, and that is, whoops, I might need some help here with the survey. Oops, I think I'm encountering some technical issues here. Thank you. Well, while we're waiting for the second survey to queue up, I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and just acknowledge someone else who has joined us, and that is Megan Thomas. She's on the VolunteerCrowd team, and she's going to be sending me some of your questions. We'll go ahead and leave some time at the end for your questions. And then Megan, if you could just put our contact page in the chat right now, then that gives everyone a direct line to us as well. So here we go. Thank you so much. Here are questions about volunteering during the pandemic. We've got a lot to share, and I want to make sure that we're hitting all the high points. So if you could get started, I think the survey is started, but I'm not quite sure. Please go ahead and answer some of the questions about what your biggest challenges are regarding volunteering. And then with everything going on in the world, what causes interest you the most? So I might have a little bit of visibility that's lacking here. Does it look like some of the results are coming in? So Grace, I can't really see the results tallying right now. Okay, looks like we're going to go over those results in a few more minutes. Okay, here we go. Thank you, everyone. So, great answers. What are your biggest questions about volunteering this year? Bill, I think you covered this really well. Do I have to volunteer more hours now that I can't participate in sports, the arts, STEM, or take the ACT or SAT? I put the words more hours in there on purpose because I'm going to make the point later on, I'm sure Bill will back me up on this, that it's not about the number of hours, it's about the quality of the experience. And we're going to help you. We've got some tools and some resources to help you make the most of that experience and then really present that experience. So it's not about a number. It's really about your contribution and how you made an impact and how it impacted you as well. How can I find virtual volunteer projects? Since the pandemic, we have worked tirelessly to find virtual volunteer projects. And we've looked in different cause areas. We've looked for different purposes like an AP or an IB class, and we'll be sharing some of that with you. And then how can I prove that I volunteer remotely? We have a tracking verification system. And then how do I present my volunteer contributions during the pandemic to colleges? Think donuts, and I'll get back to that point in a second. And then I really love this question, and I love all the answers, and I love all of the questions that come into us about how students can help out. We've had so many individuals reach out to help elderly citizens, tutoring. There's a huge need. Megan can vouch for that. She also happens to be a 7th grade teacher. And then just continuing on with STEM studying and trying to support the medical community and all of the health crises going on. So I'll go ahead and get back to our presentation. I might need some help with that this time as well. Thank you again, Grace. Okay. So just as Bill presented some of the trends from a high level view, I want to share with you what we're seeing with volunteering in the age of coronavirus. First of all, we want to emphasize that safety is so important. And if your biggest contribution as a volunteer is taking care of the health of your family, whether it's people under your own roof or your extended family members, that is a major contribution. So please know how much that is valued. And with volunteering, I hinted at this earlier, you get a break from the superlatives. It's not about your number, it's about the meaning of the experience and the substance. So it's not a contest for the most hours or an exotic experience. So we'll give it an example a little later. And then don't waste a pandemic. There are some doors that have closed and some that are opening. And now these times call for creative solutions. And students are very creative. So let your creativity shine. Step up and lead. If you see something that needs to be done, no matter how small, take the initiative and let's talk about how we can help you represent that. And then paint a picture. I've got some pictures later on. And then what we really want you to focus on is start why you want to volunteer. We have the resources to help you think about everything else. How do you volunteer? When? Where? And what do you do with all of this volunteer experience? That's what Volunteer Crowd does. We help with volunteering from the first time you volunteer to when you submit your application to college, and even beyond. We help college students. I understand there's some college students in the audience. So let's start with the end goal in mind, and that is what you want to present as far as your volunteering experience. Well, you can make it very colorful and descriptive, or you can be very straightforward about it. We like to help you build up your story. So if you talk about the number of volunteer hours, that's kind of analogous to, maybe having some donut holes. If you talked about how you used your time to volunteer, well, then there's a little bit more information. And then you can get really, really descriptive. And that's what we help you to do by creating a volunteer portfolio and using that to corroborate your narrative, to really talk about how you volunteered and how that impacted your connection with the community and what you learned. And then we back that up with the volunteer portfolio. So you can not only talk about how you volunteered and helped your community and helped make masks, but we can also show how you did it as well. We recognize that you really can't build a meaningful volunteer portfolio without meaningful opportunities. And there are a lot of reasons that students are volunteering right now. You've got your clubs, you may have a requirement for your school hours, you may be taking an IB class, which has a service component. Not many people know this, but there are, of the 36 AP classes, there are 32 with a service component. Your high school may or may not be opting in for that, but it's a growing trend. It started in 2016, and now we've got 10,000 students, I believe, who are taking AP with We Service. You may be trying to build a resume for your college application. You may be in college or in a CTE class, or just looking for leadership opportunities. So what does this look like when we're looking at these different cause areas? What are some of the opportunities available? And we're happy to report that there are some great opportunities available. So if you're very good at math and you're looking to use some of your STEM skills, let's say you're in AP or IB calculus this year, there is almost boundless need for tutors in math. Students out there are having a hard time connecting, getting that one-on-one experience. So volunteer to tutor other students. We know that there are a lot of students who are interested in the pre-med track, and unfortunately, because hospitals are not as safe of a place to volunteer as they were last year, we see that a lot of those internships are no longer available. Don't worry, we're staying in touch with the hospital internship opportunities, and we intend to let our volunteers know as soon as they're open up. Until then, please look at other opportunities. For example, working with animals. A lot of those organizations, nonprofits, rescue organizations, want your help caring and feeding for injured animals, and we can help you get placement. Environmental opportunities are still available. In fact, those are widely available. Not a whole lot has changed. So go to the beach cleanups and be a docent at an outdoor education program. We have a lot of opportunities to help seniors, either researching or doing wellness checks. And then we can also help you with helping your community in areas like hunger or homelessness by being a researcher or making PPE, personal protective equipment, for some frontline workers. And we have this whole new area that's flourished as far as being an online volunteer, helping nonprofit organizations get the word out on social media, or helping them develop graphics. And then, of course, a lot of these STEM programs have gone online, so you can help by being a STEM online mentor. We recognize that you not only need opportunities and that you'll be volunteering, but you're going to be volunteering for a lot of different reasons. And so what we want to do is we want to help you pull all of that volunteer experience into one picture that tells about your collective contribution to your community and what you've done from a very young age to the time you apply for college and even beyond that, because there are a lot of people who will be interested in that. So when we were building VolunteerCrowd, we went out and we spoke to parents and students and educators and college admissions officers, and we said, what is it that we can build? And I also worked for student volunteer clubs, so I knew how the clubs were really supporting the students, and I also knew what additional needs that students still had and how those needs weren't quite met yet. And so we launched one app so that you can get everything in one place. You can find your volunteer opportunities. You can easily track your hours, and you can have those hours verified so that you can automatically qualify for the President's Volunteer Service Award. We know students who have literally gone from one organization to another just trying to roll up their hours or get one organization to verify all their hours. We'll do that for you. When we're verifying your hours, we'll also ask for strength and skill endorsements. And so you can not only see how other people see your strengths and skills, but your future employers and college admissions offices can also see that as well. And then finally, we'll just give you a really good report of all of your volunteer hours and how that breaks out by the 20 different cause areas. Don't worry, we don't want you to volunteer for 20 different cause areas. What's really important is to show what you're interested in. So as you've noticed, we're collecting a lot of information. What's that information going to tell individuals? It's going to tell individuals that you're really investing in your character development. And character is valued, as Bill talked about in this holistic admissions process, as we're de-emphasizing certain areas of your college application, like your test scores. Some of that may be circumstantial because of the pandemic, and some of it may be a big pivot that the college is making, such as Bucknell, when Bill worked there. But character is valued. It's valued in the admissions decision. It's valued by your future network of students. I know a lot of you probably have a LinkedIn profile. You may or may not be surprised to learn that 20 million people list their volunteer experience. And then in a study by Deloitte in 2016, it found that 88% of the interviewers actually valued volunteer experience on a resume. We talked about having one place to present to really create this volunteer experience so that you didn't have to go on Google to find a volunteer opportunity and then write down your hours in one place and then try to estimate how many hours you were volunteering. And it is your volunteer portfolio. So it tells the story of you. There are numbers here for convenience, just so we can make your information really digestible. One thing I can guarantee about the volunteer portfolio is that yours will look different from everyone else's. Because today, if we asked students to volunteer, I don't know, 30 hours, everyone would do it a little differently. There are 1.6 million nonprofit organizations out there. So pick the one that means the most to you and volunteer in a position that means the most to you. And so just to take you through a little tour here, we will show the volunteer hours by cause areas, and then we'll show your top causes so that organizations, colleges can see where you really have an affinity, not only for a cause, but for a charity. We'll show how you volunteered, so that maybe you were an intern, maybe you led donation drives, and we can capture some of that leadership experience. Maybe you had a campaign at your school to encourage people to socially distance or to have the best mask award. And maybe you did a lot of events, but again, it's personalized to what you did. And then we show some of your strengths as seen through the eyes of the community members that you supported and those nonprofit leaders. And then finally, we have your playlist of some of your highlights from the volunteer experience that you had and how you felt about that experience. And we also show some milestones, such as the President's Volunteer Service Award when you qualified and by year, and then also some of the major milestones you met. So what does our program look like? We realize that there are a lot of students out there that are looking for really meaningful volunteer opportunities. I think all of the students on this webinar are. And then also some students have a need to track. Maybe you're not tracking at your school or through your club, or maybe you're tracking in too many places and you want to roll that all up and have one one organization verify all of your hours. Well, we do that, and then we also use Parchment, the system that you'll use to send your grades and also your test scores and some of your other extracurricular activities. And that's how we make sure that colleges see your volunteer transcript. So I promised that I would leave some time at the end for questions. So I'll go ahead and do that. And just thank you all for your time on behalf of me and on behalf of NSHSS and Megan and of course Bill. Any last words, Bill?
No, I just thank you, Amy. Every time I hear about the construct of VolunteerCrowd, I'm heartened that we have some way, students have a way of cataloging, not just cataloging their experience, but actually finding the ones that make an impact for them. And what I would simply underscore is, from an admissions perspective, we don't have a value system that says volunteering in this area is better than in that area, or having a paid position, a job, is better than volunteering. What we are looking for is, how does the student spend his or her time? And the circumstances of working could be required for the family, or you could be an at-home unpaid volunteer. That's important to us as well. So we just urge students to account for how they are spending their time. And I think probably in this now new virtual reality, where we used to assume from 7:30 in the morning to roughly 3:30, 4 o'clock, you were in the four walls of a high school building. That's not the case anymore. So how you're spending that time remotely, not just in your education, but in other ways, is taking on more meaning. So again, it's really, as I said, your narrative, and it's important that you write it consistent with who you are and why you're motivated to do these things.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and just leave a link here. Oops. Maybe I'll leave that up to the expert Grace to put the link up for more information. And then Megan, if you could, oh, I see the chats. So I am going to start with a few here, and Bill, I'll divvy them up. How will colleges evaluate student applications differently under the test optional? Weighted, stated, and unstated criteria? Good question.
It's a great question. And what I would, again, remind students is to go to the website of the individual college. Even before the pandemic, colleges put in their website those components of the application that matter most to them. And I always emphasize, don't use the word weight, as in WEIGHT. Use the word weigh. There is no uniform weight to each component of holistic admissions. These components are weighed differently for each student and differently by colleges. So there is no formula. There'd be a lot of unemployed admission officers if there was a computer-based process that spit out the results. Virtually every selective college you apply to, you will be read by human eyes, probably two different human eyes. And they're going to look for reasons, first and foremost, to admit you. So not to find reasons to deny. So to sum up, that answer to the question is, there's no universal evaluation weight, but there is a universal weighing process of the holistic admissions, and you will be assessed differently by different colleges. So that's why it's really important to stay true to yourself.
Like that. This is a heavy one. I like this question a lot. I feel like these topics have turned very political, COVID and Floyd. In our essays, is there such a thing as too political when discussing these topics? That's really good.
Yeah. Ooh. I think just by asking that question, you'll be admitted to most colleges or all the colleges you apply to. No, I think um, that is why I mentioned. I think that there was a concern that if there wasn't a specific question about COVID that would kind of corral that component of the experience that is frankly universal for students in the United States, and some more severe than others, um, but nonetheless universal. And what we didn't want as admission officers is to have a year where everything in the application was COVID-19 pandemic imprint. So use the COVID essay as the way you put that part together, but all others, you should be thinking openly about what you want to write about in the essays, and don't let the pandemic leach into that part of your process. Keep them separate. We are really interested in you outside the COVID-19 context.
Okay, we've got a question about whether the app will help people find volunteer opportunities in their area. And the answer is yes. So we help you find volunteer opportunities by your location, by the cause area, by the volunteer opportunity type. So that might be an internship, or it may be virtual volunteering, or a campaign, or a day donation drive, or a one-day event like a food bank. We also just added a new filter so that you can look for volunteer opportunities related to an AP service project, an IB service project for your club, for your family, or if you're an Eagle Scout. And just to let you know, because it's back to school, we're doing a big refresh on volunteer opportunities. So be sure to check it back with us because we are constantly refreshing that information. Okay, next question. I'll just take this real quick. Is age of importance when signing up to volunteer? Yes, and we have the ability for you to filter by age. And so that was something I personally wanted because I've taken younger kids to a volunteer opportunity just to be told, oh, they can't volunteer here. So we do look at the age as well. And then let's see, what is the ratio of transfer students, Bill? That's a really good question, especially with the topic of gap years.
Sure. Most colleges, in an incoming new student body, probably 90% of those new students are first-time students. So transfers are a very small percentage, typically, for selective colleges. And the reason that's the case is that the selective colleges, their retention rates are quite high because they have a choice of who they're admitting, and they think about, in admitting a student, is this student likely to succeed at their institution and remain there? Places like Bucknell, 96% of first-year students return for the second year. So that means there's really not that much space for transfers. But that being said, in the higher education field, the 4,000 four-year colleges, this is always a staggering statistic for people to hear, that only 45% of the students that start at a college will earn the degree at that college. So fewer than half. Now, that's skewed in different ways, but the point being is that's saying actually there's a lot of transfer activity because there's a lot of students, more than 1 out of 2, who for whatever reason ended up choosing, a place that wasn't the best fit for them. So it's a two-part answer. The most selective schools, transfers are very small in number, but in the less selective schools, they're losing more students, and therefore they have more openings available for first-time transfers. But again, you can find that information in the transfer admissions website for each college.
Hey, it's good information. I've got a really good question here. NHS requires that volunteering be from a 501c3 company, but those opportunities are very limited right now. How do I get my hours? And there's a specific question about tutoring. So we partner with a number of volunteer organizations that are nonprofits that pair high school students with underserved students. So you are tutoring and you're providing your tutoring service for free on behalf of a 501c3. So those opportunities exist. And we've got a great post on our blog that actually Megan wrote the intro to. Megan, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat blog.volunteercrowd.com. And then I'll go ahead and answer another question I saw. How do you get in touch with us afterward? For me, you can use Amy at volunteercrowd.com. So Amy is just AMY, and I'll let Bill answer on his own behalf.
If you would like to be in touch with me, my email address is wconley, CONLEY, the number 1, at gmail.com. And I really do enjoy getting emails in any way that I can be of help beyond this webinar. Happy to do so.
Okay, great. So we've got a question. What do you recommend me doing right now in your junior year? What do you recommend? Okay, so that's the question. And it's a great question because you should go in the direction of your interests. So what I ask students, first of all, is what are you taking in class? Some students love history. We've got some great volunteer opportunities aligned with history. And we have others that are more of the environmental nature. I mean, we've got 20 different cause areas. Some are really specific to COVID, like researching food banks and trying to understand if all of the resources are being allocated correctly. Doing wellness check for seniors to make sure that they are getting proper nutrition and they're not isolated and they have suitable housing that's the right temperature. So you can reach out to us either via email or go on our website. We've got the chat there, and we also have a contact form. So multiple ways to reach us, and we're happy to help you nail that down a little bit. So Bill, I think this one is for you. What advice do you have about rising seniors, and what do you advise rising seniors should do, knowing that there's a possibility of not being able to do testing?
I think it really, the testing could be a very regionalized impact. As I said, I mentioned earlier, well over 1 million fewer students had actually taken a first-time SAT compared to the year before. But it really is being played out differently in different regions of the country in terms of the incidence and the density of the pandemic. It's, if your region of the country and when you're trying to register for an SAT or ACT, and they're saying there is no test date in October, or you're not able to find a location to take it, I think you simply, I don't expect you to get on a plane and fly to a place where you can take the SAT. There are so many more schools that are offering test optional and test blind, and it may mean just that some schools that are requiring testing, you may not be able to provide test scores. But that doesn't mean there's not another institution of equal fit to that institution that you could apply to and does not require your SATs. The other thing I say to people that maybe you had an older brother or sister who graduated from high school a year or 2 or 3 years ago, and they took the SAT 2 or 3 times. Again, that's ancient history. We do not expect to see in students who are graduating in high school in 2021 to have multiple tests results if they have one at all. So again, control what you can control. If you can't get a test near where you are, then look at those institutions that are opting out of testing, and you will find one that's a great fit for you.
Very good. Okay, so we have a few other questions. I'm going to take a few just because I know I can answer them quickly. What are some of the well-known organizations that want young leaders? We get this question a lot. I've heard it from students, parents, high school counselors, college admissions officers. So what we did is we added a feature so that you can search by leadership opportunities. I'll make the same disclaimer I did earlier, and that is we are doing a big back to school initiative. So we just launched this feature, and we are tagging a lot of the volunteer opportunities for leadership opportunities. And we're spelling out what the leadership opportunity is, because we recognize that when students are told, you need leadership, that's so general. And so what we're trying to do is really help guide you to where the leadership opportunities are and how you can develop those skills. Okay. Bill,
Could I just jump in, Amy, for a quick
absolutely.
second on leadership? That is one of the myths in college admissions, that if you're not a leader, you're not going to get into an Ivy League institution or a highly selective institution. We don't look at leadership as the holy grail. Leaders can only be leaders if there's some followers. And in fact, most of the college campus is filled with followers, and being an effective follower, so to speak, somebody who is a community oriented individual. And if you don't choose to be the leader of this particular group, but you are a major contributor, that matters. So by all means, if you are, have this leadership thing and you want to really get in the mix, that's great. But if that's not your calling, please know that admissions recognizes that that there's far more followers in the world than leaders, and being a great follower is a very valued quality.
And to build on that, one of the strengths that we report on is collaboration. And so if you can work with others, to Bill's point, you don't need to just be able to lead, you need to work with others. And so that's something that we try to highlight about our volunteers. There was a question about whether or not VolunteerCrowd is free. There is a free component of it. We recognize there are a lot of students out there that just need to get their hours for school, and maybe they're focused on other extracurriculars, which is great. We do have plans for students who are really trying to use volunteering as a stepping stone to explore college majors and careers, and that's our Impact Member Program. You can go to volunteercrowd.com or the link that we provided here, and we'll also send out a follow-up email and see the plans. There is a discount for NSHSS members, so the Impact Member Plan. That one is $34 a year and helps you with that college resume building and the some of the more harder to find volunteer opportunities. And then we've got our College and Career Advantage Plan, which layers on the verification services and the awards and the recommendations. But you will always be able to find fun and easy volunteer projects on VolunteerCrowd for free. So please feel free to sign up. And I believe we're out of time, but not out of questions. So one of the things that's nice about these presentations is that we're given all of your questions as well as your contact information. So I will make sure that I split those up with Bill, and we can get back to you on that. You can also go to VolunteerCrowd and look at our chat or interact with us on chat, or also use our contact form or the email address. How about you, Bill? What's the best way to reach out to you?
And again, email wconley1@gmail.com. And I'll just take this opportunity again. Thank you to the NSHSS folks, Grace and Amy and Megan from Volunteer Crowd. And a closing comment is to the seniors especially. I am hopeful that you are the only class that literally is doing this college admission process in this context. It makes you unique. You should feel good about that and know that admissions and colleges are also new at this pandemic-based admission process. So go forward, go confidently, be yourself. It's going to work out. Thank you again.
Nice thought. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Bill, especially. It's always a privilege to co-present with you. Thank you, Megan, for your support in the background and NSHSS. We're always so happy to partner with you on these events. And I'll be online at Volunteer Crowd if anyone wants to chat. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. Be safe. Have a wonderful year.
Very good. Bye now.
Bye.